This podcast is part of the Game and Entertainment Network. Visit tgenetwork.net to find the latest episodes from all our shows.
It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belghast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again. Time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 173. Tonight I'm joined by Ashgar.
Hello.
Grace.
Hello.
And Kodra.
Heyo.
We're down a few people, and now I'm actually going to have to edit the template to remove names. This week was the end of the Final Fantasy XIV The Rising event, and I was a horrible person and never actually made it on to play it. But I hear tell that Kodra, you, and Ash did.
Yeah, don't feel bad. I didn't make it either.
It's true. We completed the quest, A Recurring Bug.
That was the title of the quest.
You meet Yoshida, and he is trying to hunt down a bug.
This is the Bard. You meet the Bard.
Who is definitely not Yoshida, right?
Also, if you missed
person.
it, that Lalafell that gives you the quest is Yoshida's character.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
I did not realize that.
Yeah, like the only way you would probably
So
know that is because he streams on that character a lot.
Yes. So, yes, 3 different avatars of Yoshida appear during this quest.
Well, and then you get to experience a cheap dungeon. You, in fact, unlock it in your duty roulette.
Well, in your in-room. But yeah, you unlock Cheap Dungeon as part of this event.
It is like wizardry-style dungeon.
Sort
Now,
of
is
first
it
person, you see
legitimately
some walls,
randomized?
dungeon crawler. I do not know.
Like, I've seen pictures of it, and I didn't know if it was, like, actually random, or if it was the same solution every time.
I only did it the once and haven't done it in my in-room, so I can't say.
I understand there are several different solutions to it. For example, my answer was fantasy.
Mine was Crystal.
That seems accurate.
You get a weird first-person dungeon crawler-style dungeon, and then you get some clues and have to solve a puzzle at the end. Once you do this, Yoshida shows up as Yoshida and thanks you for playing his game. Before it goes back to, the Bard and the Lalafell.
What were the rewards this year?
A orchestrion role for... The one I remember is Answers Reprise. So, like, the weird, creepy version of Answers that played during the end of an era. Also another orchestrion role, and I don't actually remember what the other reward was. Really, I mostly did it for access to that one orchestrion role and Cheap Dungeon.
I mean, like, part of the reason why I didn't actually get around to logging in is that they've trained me in that eventually it will end up on their little store, and if I wanted it bad enough, I can go get it.
While true, it will show up a year later and cost money, so...
Yeah, well... Yeah, my problem is that I hadn't patched Final Fantasy XIV in ages, so it would have taken a while.
Machines were in a bit of a low spot in that game at the moment.
I hit the point where I want to raid and don't really have a regular raid group thing, and the occasional pugging stuff that we were doing is just a bit too mentally taxing for me to do consistently week over week and beat my head against. So I just kind of checked out, and I'm sure as soon as the next patch hits, I'll be back in. But that's kind of the way it goes with that game, especially for me. Like, if I don't have the motivation to grind for stuff because I'm not actually raiding, then I'm not going to be bothered to log in every day to grind more gear.
I have no idea why. I don't know. Like, I have no clue why I seem to have bounced off of it this expansion.
I mean, I am also in the same boat as Grace in that I kind of really want to raid and I kind of don't really want to do anything else. But I feel like I always get to that point in these MMOs. Especially now, like, I don't have time to do things that aren't, like, a couple hours a week.
I think that for me, there's definitely a lack of solo stuff that I want to be doing. Like, I could be lying in and I don't know what, doing something solo, but like most of the goals and things that I have in that game are at a minimum require running some dungeons and stuff. And I just kind of checked out of that without a solid group of people so that I don't have to pug. Whereas lately, like, I've been playing a bunch of WoW, and WoW is kind of boring, but man, there's a ton of stuff that I can do without ever having to see another human being.
I think for me, honestly, I just mostly burnt myself out.
Samurai.
Well, I mean, leveling the warrior and the samurai within very short succession of each other without any reasonable method of actually doing that thing. Like, that's ultimately the problem that alting in Final Fantasy XIV ends up having is until they increment up the what is it, Dark Dungeon, Deep Dungeon, Palace of the Dead, whatever you want to call it. But until they increment that up, there's really no great way to level an additional character. I mean, if you're a tank or a healer,
okay.
You can. A healer is fine.
Also, if you are not in a hurry, the daily leveling roulette is worth a fair bit, and still pops pretty fast for DPS.
I mean, I think had I done them the other direction, leveled samurai first and then leveled warrior, it maybe wouldn't have felt so generally awful, but
it's definitely what I did in Heaven's Ward, and was kind of wishing I had done this time, because now I don't have a max level DPS.
I mean, I know, like, at some point a patch will happen, and I will be all about this. Again, it's just like right now I'm not forcing myself to play it when I'm not in a high point with the game.
When there's Destiny 2 to pay attention to.
Look, everything is taking a backseat to Destiny 2. But we kind of knew that was going to happen. I mean, like, it is hard to put into words just how obsessive I am about Destiny as a whole.
Oh, pretty obsessed?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I know lore from Destiny 1, okay?
That seems obsessive.
Like, I could talk to you for like 5 hours about various pieces of lore.
Please don't.
But, like, yeah, I mean,
I can't laugh that much because if it was actually released for the PC right now, I would be obsessively playing it and ignoring everything else in favor of it right now also. So.
I have been driving Grace nuts, I'm sure.
It's true, because like every day it's like, look at this cool thing I did, this stuff I got. I hate you. I have to wait, damn it.
I forget who it was. I think it was Scopeak that rented it with a Redbox because he was tired of waiting.
I am waiting for PC release.
I'm waiting. I'm just not waiting very patiently.
It's just weird. Like, to some extent, I'm kind of looking at the PS4 as a learning experience for when I play it on the PC. I mean, because like I've already learned a bunch of lessons. This week I leveled my Warlock, and I learned tricks for gearing purposes while leveling the Titan that I absolutely employed while doing the Warlock, and it went so much smoother. So much so that I greatly outpaced my Titan for a while. I had my Warlock at like 282 power, and my Titan was still like 276. And then I managed to fix that at least a little bit and get the Titan to 281 so that they're within a single point of each other. I don't like. So mostly I was wanting to talk tonight a little bit about how that process works, of how power is a thing in Destiny 2.
So is it fundamentally different from the way that light works?
Sort of. I mean, yes and no. Like it is very similar, but not exactly the same in that the way you gain it is, I don't know. It's a little different. So for the listeners that haven't been deep in the woods in Destiny for the last several years of their life, when the game was released initially, it had the worst leveling system where gear had a light stat on it. And that was the only thing that mattered after, level 20?
Yep.
And so you were constantly equipping items just because it had slightly more light than the last item so that you could crank up your total light score, which was your real level, but it was a weird, obtuse way to level. And then Taken King came out and they introduced Infusion. And that allowed
Infusion was around when the game came out originally, right?
No, it came in with Taken King.
So it was bad during Taken King?
Well, when it first started, maybe? So there was a system like Infusion where you collected these things called Ascended Shards, and you could sort of level a weapon up a little bit in power.
I guess that's what I'm remembering.
Yeah, no, that wasn't at launch. It came in, I don't know, maybe Dark Below, where you could sort of power up a weapon a little bit. Like it wasn't really Infusion. You could just make it more powerful as time went on.
Because what I remembered is the period of time when there was Infusion, but unlike the later iteration, there was sort of this complex calculus of how much infusing an item would actually raise the light level of some other item.
And that's kind of what I think of as like Destiny Loot 2.0 was you had items, you could increase the light level of purples or exotics, but there was like a cap on how much you could raise per item you functionally ate. You would basically destroy one item and infuse it into the other item, and then you would gain a certain amount of light based on that. And I want to say it was about 5 or 6. It was the maximum light you could gain off something, unless there was a massive disparity.
Do you have to be infusing better items, or are you just infusing all of your trash items?
No. You have to infuse a higher light item into the lower light item to bring its light up.
So if you get something good, you can build up something bad.
Right. You can build up something that you like.
But it wasn't an even trade at first.
Right. It wasn't an even trade. Now, April of 2015, I think, they put in a patch that made Infusion a 1-to-1. So like if you had a level 310 item and you put it into a 250 item, it became a 310 item. So like it was face value Infusion. And that was great. Like it was awesome. It allowed you to pretty easily, push up your character and then also push up your other two characters by feeding remnants from the first one over to them. And that's why I had 2 or 3 max 400 light characters in Destiny 1. Now we scan forward to Destiny 2, and they kept the 1-to-1 light infusion system, but there's an asterisk there. There are these things that are basically purple quality mods. Sometimes a weapon will drop with one. There's a way to add one later in the game. And those are worth basically 5 light or 5 power. So regardless of if it's a piece of armor, if it's a weapon, if it has this purple mod in it, it's 5 levels higher. Which made me confused at first when I started trying to infuse things, not realizing I was consuming an item with a purple mod into an item without a purple mod, and then losing 5 levels in the process. Because that mod was accounting for 5 of the face value levels of that item, which is really confusing at first. Now that I've figured that out, there's a way you can kind of game the system where there's some weird stuff going on with Infusion. The biggest problem with Infusion right now is you have to put like items together. It's no longer like in Destiny 2, or in Taken King and beyond, it's like all primary weapons could feed all other primary weapons. So you could have a pulse rifle and use it to power up your favorite auto rifle or hand cannon. Now, auto rifles can only power up auto rifles, and scout rifles can only power up scout rifles, and so on. And that's kind of frustrating.
That sounds pretty annoying.
It is.
Part
of
what I liked about the previous system is that, hey, I don't like auto rifles, but I really like scout rifles. And so now if I get a really awesome auto rifle, I can make my scout rifle awesome instead.
Yeah, no, that doesn't work anymore.
Boo.
Additionally, Titan armor can only power up Titan armor, and Warlock armor can only power up Warlock armor. So that means I can't feed my refuse to another character and use it to pull up their light level.
That's terrible.
Yeah, so like there's a lot of weird constraints that they put on the system that I do not like.
So
I am living with them, and it is way better than Destiny 1.0, but it's just annoying to take a step backwards from where we were.
Yeah, it feels like it's just a less good... Like, this is one of those things
It feels like they're trying to slow down your progression because they don't have content ready yet.
I absolutely think it feels like they're trying to slow down our progression. That said, like, I've learned some weird tricks. I said, I don't know if I said last week, but I had hit the what is effectively the blue and purple level cap. And I figured out there's also an asterisk there as well. So in theory, previously when you were at a specific level, there would be a point where blue items would never go past that point in Destiny 1. And I forget what the cap was, but it was like 320, something like that. I don't remember what the actual number was, but there was a point at which you could not get past with blue item. And then you would have to use purple item. And then there would be another point where your light would stop raising and you would have to use either exotics or high-level activities. So a raid or the trials or nightfalls. Basically, true end-game activities were the only way you could bump your light up at a point. And I keep saying light because I have... 4 years of using light as a term instead of power, but it's technically power now.
Power seems more straightforward.
Power is way more straightforward, but I'm still going to call it light because I'm used to saying light. But what's weird this time is you basically have a floating cap of what you can hit. So the official start of the cap is 260 for blues and 265 for purples, which is really not much of a difference between the two. But as soon as you use some of the end game activities to move your light up again, then those two also move up at the same time. So you start getting blues and purples at whatever the maximum light level that you can get currently is. There's some weirdness that you can do with those purple modded items where you keep infusing what is currently your maximum blues into them, and then they leapfrog it by 5 levels. So I have managed to get a lot of movement level-wise by doing that little game. And I now have like a modded item for most slots and can keep slowly incrementing them up as I get items to drop. At 280 light, the gunsmith will start selling you these mods so that you can basically put them in anything you want. And these are the items that tweak what the like armor right now and weapons. So every weapon in the game drops the same stats regardless of when you get it. I mean, it'll be different level or light level based on technically what your light was when you got it, but like it's the same perks no matter if you get it at level 10 or if you get it at, you know, light level 265. It's the same gun, which means you end up deconstructing a lot of duplicate weapons. If you don't want to use them for infusion purposes, there's no need to ever hang on to multiple copies because they're exactly the same role. It's not the situation where, like, I had 5 of one specific handgun because they were all slightly different in what their role stat was in Destiny 1. And each of them was useful in a specific edge case.
I'm very glad that they changed that.
You've talked about this before. This also sounds just utterly miserable.
Which sounded miserable? The rolls?
The old version.
The old version where you would always get the wrong thing. Yeah.
I mean, like, you were hoping for the quote-unquote God roll, and to some extent, that was what kept people doing the Crucible and doing all this stuff so that they would maybe someday get that optimally statted item that they've always wanted. But, like, that optimally statted item was really a lie. I mean, very few people ever got that item. I mean, I had a few things that I considered god rolls, and I cherished them because I would never get another one as good as that thing. But, so now all guns are the same. Where you can tweak your guns is with mods, and you can I think there's like a few options for each weapon type for what they do. Similarly, like armor comes in 3 varieties, and like that's it. And every piece of a specific kind of armor will have the same stat package on it. So you either have high resilience armor, which means basically you take less damage. High recovery armor means your health and shields come back faster, or high mobility armor in that you just move faster. And from there, you apply mods to it to tweak what you want it to do. So like, if you want it to make your kinetic weapons reload faster, you can put a mod on it for that. If you want it to cause like void damage to recharge your super faster, you can put a mod on it to do that. So there's like lots of little tweaks that you can do at the mod level, but it's super, I don't want to use the word modular, but that's kind of the only word that I can think of right now. It's like it's very like a Lego piece. You basically have armor that you like the look of and like the base stats of, and then you keep infusing stuff into it every time you need to level up its overall level, and then you put the mod in that you want, and you put the shader in that you want, and for the most part you can live off that same item indefinitely. But the only problem that I've encountered is I am at this point where I can only really move the needle forward if I am doing quote-unquote end-game activities or one of a handful of weekly quests. And why I leveled the Warlock was because these weekly quests are on a per-character basis, not per account. And there's a milestone, which is like their weeklies, and it will say it rewards powerful gear. And that is the code word for something called a Luminous Engram, which will drop a couple of items out of it, and they will be a significant level increase over wherever you're at currently. So like most of the time it's been around 10 levels higher whenever I open one of these. And there's one that you get from clan experience. So every time you do something in the game, if you're in a clan, you gain experience towards that clan's level. And if you gain 5,000 experience during a week, you get one of these powerful engrams. And like I usually do it in a couple hours the first day after reset. It does not take very long to get that one. There's another one for the Crucible, and as far as I can tell, it's roughly somewhere between 8 and 10 games of the Crucible. You get somewhere between 10 and 15% credit per Crucible match, and it's somewhat dependent upon how you do, but the lowest I've ever seen it go up is 10% for just showing up and playing. So I think in the worst case scenario, you'll have to do 10 matches to get it. And that gives you a powerful engram. There's one attached to the Nightfall. There's like a hot zone that's chosen every week, like that they want you to go do events on a specific planet, and you get like bonus rewards for doing it. And if you do enough events to tick the bar up to 100%, you get another engram from doing that. And then finally, there's one associated with the raid. And right now, the raid and the Nightfall ones are the only ones I'm not able to do every week. Mostly because I just don't have a team for Nightfall on a regular basis, and raid literally just opened up, and my clan hasn't beaten the raid yet. So, like, I've entered the phase where things have slowed down greatly. Now, occasionally, once in a blue moon, I will see a better light item from one of the many ways to get purple items. Like, every NPC has, like, a faction associated with it, and there's items that you collect by doing stuff out in the world that you hand in, and when you fill their little faction bar, you get a purple Ingram, which usually actually equates to like 2 items at a time. Occasionally I get a slightly better item that way. Occasionally when running events on planets, I get exotics to the point where I usually get 1 or 2 a day, and those absolutely move the needle forward. So there's still a grind. It was just way faster to get to the point where everything slows down. And I'd be curious.
Feel like I said this already, but they're slowing you down maybe a little bit for things that are not out yet.
Oh, I imagine absolutely that's probably what they're doing. I mean, like, we have consumed the shit out of this game, and the fact that I have 2 characters at 280 plus light is, I mean, like, I am nothing compared to some of the people I've seen. Like, there's some madness that, like, all the quote-unquote pro Destiny players have done, which is basically create 3 of the same class so that they can swap 100% of the gear back and forth between the characters, and then they get 3 of these powerful Ingrams every single week, like one for each of the objectives. So like some of those people are well over 300 power, but like that's kind of madness to create like 3 Titans or 3 Hunters or 3 Warlocks.
It would get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's what helped me so much on the Warlock was this week. We had our first appearance of Zur, and Zur was bringing 270 light items, and I bought a chest piece for the Warlock, and then whenever I hit 20, I equipped the 270 chest piece and swapped over all my 270 to 280 weapons, and that took me up to like 250-ish light, which allowed me to really quickly get into the upper echelons of light. And I imagine, like, similarly, I went ahead and picked up the Hunter chest, and I could do the same thing with a Hunter, and then basically have all the Luminous unlocked. The only difference there is, like, all the pieces of armor are not swappable. But anyway, I said this was going to be super deep in the weeds. I guess, like, the only thing that I dislike about it is it feels like we definitely took a step backwards. And I'm wondering at some point in the future if they will open things up a bit.
I would hope so. Like, it sounds like you said, that they're throttling things back right now because they kind of have to. And I would be okay with that if it turned out that in a couple months they release those restrictions on what types of items you can infuse things into.
What they've done in the past is whenever they release the heroic version of a raid, they would then slightly trickle up the light levels. So like in this case, if the blue cap is 260, well, they might move the blue cap up to 280 or at least 270, where like there's a little bit more wiggle room to let somebody catch up faster. And they did that throughout the history of Destiny 1, so I mean, I kind of hope they'll do that here. I also at this point have so many shaders that like I will never use half of them, so that's less of a problem. It's still annoying, but it's less of a problem than I thought it would be.
I still hate that on principle, and I still hate it because I know myself, and looking at the way that system works, I'm never going to actually use any of them, even if I have a million of them.
There's also the secondary problem of shaders that come from rare sources.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of shaders that I have no clue where they even came from. Like, there's some that I see often enough, and I know, oh, this one regularly comes from opening a Cabal chest. This one regularly comes from opening a Fallen chest. This one comes from this kind of event. But, like, there's a lot of them that I've picked up that I have no clue where they came from. And as a result, I'm super hesitant to use them. Or, like, I might use them to dye my favorite gun or a ship, but I probably wouldn't use them for an armor set because I can't reliably get them because I didn't know where they came from. I don't know. The honeymoon is very much not over yet, but I'm also seeing that there's definitely some flaws in some of their designs. So I'm going to use this as kind of a branching off point into another discussion topic that we were talking about before the show. One of the problems that one of my friends is running into is there are functionally, I think, 4 reasonable ways of getting these powerful engrams every week. And if you're not doing all of them, you're at a bit of a disadvantage. And the frustration there is not all of these types of content are something people like to do. Namely, there's one for the Crucible. And if you're totally anti-Crucible, that is going to be the most miserable thing, and you're basically going to just accept that you're never going to get that engram every week. So I guess to some extent, like, it feels bad that they have skewed the rewards in such a way where you have to PvP at least somewhat to get the full benefit of. And we were talking about before the show as to whether or not developers have an obligation to kind of give equal access and equal treatment to, like, all the types of players that are playing the games.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tricky question, right? Because some people like both of those things. Some people want to do raids and Crucible, and they get more rewards when they do that in the current system. Whereas someone who only wants to PvP and doesn't care about raids, or someone who only wants to raid and doesn't care about PvP, is only really getting access to half of the content. And I mean, these kinds of games and MMOs have always had some aspect of this, and not everything is for everybody. Not everybody has to do all of the things that are available. But I don't know, so like, where do you draw that line? Like, the distinction between PvE content and PvP content, like, I think it's pretty established that, I mean, a lot of games try to keep them separate by making the rewards from one not super applicable to the other. But, you know, I don't know. And then there's this other piece of it, like, what if the content that you got when you were playing through on your Titan was fundamentally different than what you get when you're playing a Hunter? And so, like, that's the issue that I've been running into lately in World of Warcraft, where I've been sort of working my way through all of the classes and doing their class hall stories, and getting their weapons and all of this stuff. And it's very cool to me. I'm really grateful that the devs actually put in this content. Every class has its own story, and all of these weapons have their own little bits of lore and a little couple quest chains to go and get them. Like, it's very cool, but it's also super uneven. So some classes have a bunch of really unique weapon quests. Some classes have ones that are obviously repurposed from something else.
We talked about that a bit when Legion came out.
Yeah. But it, man, you know, like, it feels awkward that some of these classes are just fundamentally getting a better deal. Like, I just did the Death Knight Order Hall and the Mount quest, and all the weapon quests, and man, their stuff lore-wise and, like, just the flavor of it and the care of what went into those quests just felt so much better than, for example, my monk, which has a kind of cool mount, but all of the quests for their Order Hall and their mount chain felt okay, but not anything special. And you know, I don't know whether there's some obligation that they have to be the same, or whether the fact that they exist and I can make an alt and go have access to the other ones if I really want means that it's okay that they're uneven. But man, I'm super jealous of the Death Knights and their fancy quests.
Well, I mean, I feel like there was a lot of problem with, like, the Shadow Knight, not Shadow Knight, the Shadow Priest weapon quest, at least.
Yeah,
and it was sort of a rehash of, like, an area for, like, I mean, like, one of the warrior quests is to literally go to the same place.
I find that kind of interesting because, I mean, in vanilla, like, they could have honestly probably rehashed Anathema Benediction, and people would have loved that.
Yeah, and so they did with the mount quest. Like, the Paladin mount quest is absolutely a retread of the the Blood Elf Paladin mount quest, and it was amazing. It was super good. I loved it. But yeah, I guess the Shadow Priests go to someplace in Fall, and I guess I haven't done the warrior ones yet. It's the only one I have not seen yet. But for instance, like the Druids have this really awesome quest. The Boomkins go and track down the Scythe of Elune.
Let me guess. You did a warlock recently?
Yeah. And I guess it's the Affliction Warlock
has a quest to go to Duskwood for no good reason and find a site that is not the Scythe of Elune.
For no good reason. Yeah, that was really lackluster. And the same thing, like the Arcane Mage has this awesome quest where you go to the Nexus and you do all this arcane stuff with a blue dragon and you get this cool staff that talks to you, and then you go back on a Disciplined Priest and go to the Nexus and hang out with all these arcane things and a blue dragon and get a staff there for some reason.
Yeah, like the spoiler alert, the Arms Warrior is to go to the exact same place as the Shadow Priest, and like not 100% sure why. Like, I mean, you're there for a different reason, obviously, but
really, you're there asking yourself, why am I doing this Shadow Priest thing?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really okay with that because Shadow Priests have gotten the shaft so badly in this expansion that like maybe it's okay that they get something cool. It's been pretty strange and frustrating to constantly be running around with my Shadow Priest, and like every other word out of everyone's mouth lately, especially since the artist stuff, but even before that, is like all about the light, and you have to overcome the shadow and whatever, and like, no, I kind of like the shadow. I'm still on your side, guys. Like the whole priest mount quest was like going to this like newly discovered Titan archive and cleansing the protectors there and like cleansing them of shadow and returning them to the light, and like I'm there on my Shadow Priest. I don't know why I'm cleansing them of shadow. And then once I get the mount, it turns purple when I ride it in shadow form anyway.
Well, that's a whole other question too, is like World of Warcraft specifically has struggled with trying to keep all of the specs and classes in line with each other. And I think that's the universal MMO problem, is how to make it so that like you don't have the chosen specs and the horrible specs. I mean, and to some extent you went through this with at least a court of public opinion in Final Fantasy XIV with Stormblood, where everyone just had empirical knowledge that, scholars were no good anymore.
Yeah, that was incredibly frustrating. And, I mean, the silly part is that a lot of that is just the court of public opinion, right? Like, Scholar was totally functional. It was maybe not as strong, but it was totally fine. But man, people would be mad if you were playing one because everybody knows that Scholar is really terrible right now. Like, I think that's a different problem, a related problem, but like I'm not sure what the devs can do to remedy the public perception of some of these things. And it happens in pretty much every MMO. Oh well, this thing sims like 0.05% higher on DPS than the other spec, so the other spec is trash and no one should ever use it ever.
Well, and I think a lot of it, too, comes down to a simple fact of, like, they used to feel powerful on this class and spec, and they don't feel powerful anymore, so obviously it's broken. So they're going to go play the thing that they still feel powerful on.
I mean, that definitely happened to me at one point with the Fury Warrior and Wrath. Like, justifiable nerfs happened, but I was not geared out at the level that the nerfs were designed to hit, and I started feeling like I was hitting with wet noodles. 2 giant wet noodles.
Like if you weren't already at the armor penetration cap, you were really hurting after that nerf. Because I want to say it was something to do with armor penetration and the way that it was calculated.
I'm pretty sure this one was a nerf to Fury generation.
Oh, okay, so this was an earlier nerf than that. Like, I remember when we were doing Ice Crown Citadel, they did a huge armor penetration nerf that hit GU and Thalen pretty hard. Because, like, armor pen was also the hunter stat of choice.
Feral also suffered from that one. It was kind of everyone's physical damage stat of choice because it was broken.
But I think, like, if a dev isn't super careful about these things, it develops the feeling that they like this class better than they like the other classes. And there's been so many of those over the years where, like, people just assumed, oh, they hate shamans, or they hate paladins, or they hate whatever other class.
I mean, ArenaNet actually does hate necromancers, but that's a separate thing.
Wait, why does ArenaNet actually hate necromancers?
Because necromancers get 2 life bars.
Is this a problem?
Honestly, I don't think it's a problem, but the player base has decided that because necromancers do less damage, because ArenaNet has decided they should do less damage because they have 2 life bars, necromancers are bad.
Well, and honestly, that was a problem back in Dark Age of Camelot. They had a necromancer, and it was the god of PvE soloing because you couldn't ever kill it. But it had the worst damage ever. Like, it was tanky as hell, but you would never bring one to anything that required damage. And that's always kind of a trade-off of survival and damage output.
I happen to think Necromancer is super fun, so I'm not caring a whole lot about the court of public opinion.
I like my axe Necromancer. I like hitting things with an axe from across the screen.
It's much better to be up close and hit things with a greatsword.
I don't have enough points to do that.
Clearly you should work on that then. It's like the best thing ever. But as far as the PvP versus PvE thing goes, I am on the insane quest to craft a legendary. And this requires a bunch of PvE in that you need to world complete. And you need to get some dungeon currencies. You need to farm a ton of materials. But also it requires some PvP because you need a gift of battle. The only way to get a gift of battle is to do World v World. Which is sort of not real PvP, but it's still PvP.
What does not real PvP mean?
Guild Wars has 2 forms of PvP. First is World v World, which is sort of like the DAOC jump into massive map with large teams and have at it over some structures. People apparently run around as a death ball, do things, capture things, do whatever.
I mean, it's very similar to Alterac Valley.
Except less organized. Or more organized.
Right. But the same kind of structures exist in World v World. You've got, like, mines and resource gathering and...
Yeah, you got a bunch of stuff. And the other form was considered structured PvP. I think they just call it PvP now. Which is lobby-based. You have, like, individual matches. Gear is standardized. You are level 80 regardless of what level you actually go in as, with full access to abilities, specs, so on and so forth. And that has a sort of different reward structure.
Do they also have, like, an ascended reward that you can get off of there?
I don't know. I know there is... So as of right now, there are 3 ways to get legendary armor. I'm trying to get a legendary weapon, which has been in the game since it launched, basically, how to do these things. But legendary armor is newish. You can get it through World v World, or PvP, or raiding. And there is no crossover in these sort of progression paths. Either you're working way through one of these by doing your chosen mode, or you are not. I don't think you can progress toward ascended weapons in PvP, but I might be wrong about that. Ascended weapons also don't matter in PvP because your gear is standardized.
Right. So it's like in Destiny, the Crucible is like that. Doesn't matter if you go in at level 1 or if you go in at level, 20 with, 350 cap light, you're scaled to be exactly the same damage output. I mean, I actually like that style of PvP far better than the other options.
Yeah, I mean, that tends to be my favorite style of PvP because it makes it more down to skill, and it's not that I have much skill, but I'm at least in a position where only my skill is holding me back instead of both my skill and my lack of PvP gear is holding me back.
Like, I've always been one of those people that bordered on, I don't ever want a PvP, but I don't know, like in Destiny, I play a shocking amount of Crucible, and it's always because I'm chasing gear of some form. Like, that is absolutely the thing that gets me to PvP is relevant gear.
I had PvP in FF14 because I think some of the gear looks amazing.
Man, like, I actually looked forward to Iron Banner weekend because, you know, there was interesting gear on the line, and that was nothing but a lot of PvP, and that wasn't even scaled PvP. That was, like, uncapped. If you're not at max gear, you're at a clear disadvantage PvP, and I did it, and I enjoyed it. I need to try World v World just because, like, maybe it's more enjoyable than I remember.
The advice given to me was that if I don't really intend to be that into it, there's a mode called Edge of the Mists, which doesn't really match you with your server. It matches you in basically random groups for limited duration matches. And so you can sort of get more done there as far as rewards go.
Speaking of player versus player, have you gotten, like, one of the daily objectives is sometimes, like, do a minigame. Have you gotten shuffled into the one that's basically like...
Egg Brawl? That one?
No, like,
the Mario Kart one.
No, what's the... Oh God, what's the novel? Battle Royale.
No, I haven't gotten into that one.
It's basically Battle Royale. There are, like... You're on an island with a bunch of other players, and you're constantly taking damage as you go, and there are, like, villages on the island that have resources, like Band-Aids and, you know, ways to heal yourself, and, like, arrows, like single arrows. And then you have to find a bow to take out the other players, and it's weird. I don't know, like, I think my perfect MMO experience would be if there were lots of different paths and you could mix and match your way through them to get to the same relevant point at the end. Like, if you wanted to PvP today, you could PvP today and be slowly moving the needle towards whatever goal you have. And then, you know, tomorrow, you know, you could also move the needle forward a little bit in raiding.
Yeah, well, and I would like a system that doesn't feel like it's penalizing anyone for skipping out on one piece that they don't enjoy, or conversely, that doesn't make the people who are super hardcore feel like they have to do all the things in order to be maxed out. So, for instance, a mix and match, sort of like the world quests, this expansion in WoW, where, you know, you have to do 4 of these things to get a reward, but you can pick which 4 out of, you know, 7 or 8 choices you want to do. So if you want to go do the PvP objective, go for it. If you don't, that's fine. You can get your reward some other way.
Dailies in Guild Wars are like that. I basically do the PvE ones most days, but they also exist PvP and World v World ones that you can get rewards from instead.
I think that for me is an ideal system because it lets you have choice and it lets you do the things that you think are fun, and it doesn't make you feel like you are missing out by not doing the things you don't enjoy.
Yeah, like, back to the Destiny 2 example, if they had made it so that, like, doing 4 things a week gets you these powerful Ingrams, and you get to choose which 4 you wanted to do, and you could do the same one 4 times if you wanted to.
You realize if they changed it to that now, people would complain that they wouldn't be able to do all of them and get, like, the 5 or 6.
Well, I mean, like, that's per character. Like, right now, they're getting... I guess technically there's 6 that you can do if you're doing the raid and you're doing the Nightfall. But, like, fine, leave raid and Nightfall as special things because, you know, they should get a reward for being able to do the Nightfall or the raid. But the ones that everybody's going to try and do every week, like, just let them do the one that they like over and over if they want. Or if there's a couple that they like, do them each a couple times. Like, I mean, my personal druthers would be I'd just do the events on the planet over and over and over and over and over until I got all 4. Because I like doing events on the planets. I really like heroic events. If I can convince people not to screw it up for me. Because you can absolutely close out the event before you can push it into the heroic phase. But slowly, over time, people are figuring out that these are the things you should do to progress the event. It kind of reminds me of the things in the rifts, or the raids, or I guess the rifts in Rift, where they had like optional phases at the end that you may or may not actually be able to get to.
Never see because people would finish them first.
Yes. It's not that bad, but yeah, it's the same kind of idea. I think at the end of the day, like, it feels horrible when you have a vastly varied experience than everyone else, and you know that you're not getting to see all the good stuff because of it. And I mean, to some extent, like, I'm going to break this off into another discussion that kind of bugs me, is we have fought elitism in MMOs like forever, and it has recently infected Destiny 2.
I mean,
because
I'm shocked. I'm so shocked.
Yeah. Like, Grace and I talked about this a little bit in the week. Like, being in a clan is kind of important because you get free stuff. And so basically, like, there's clan XP, and you get a reward for helping contribute to leveling the guild. Then there are weekly guild tasks, for lack of a better term. So, like, you know, there's a Crucible one for doing so much in the Crucible. There's another one for running the Nightfall. There's another one for running the raid. And there's another one for someone in the guild getting a flawless run of Trials of the Nine, which is like this PvP super serious thing where you have to win.
Is it the new Trials of Osiris?
Yes, new Trials of Osiris. You have to win 7 matches in a row without... Well, I guess technically you can have 3... Basically, you have a card that progresses, and you have to get to 7 wins before you get to 3 losses. And I think technically if you've done that card, where if you've gotten 7 without getting to 3, the guild as a whole ticks that little box. Now, what's interesting about it is everyone in the guild gets a reward. Like, 1 per account, based on someone in the guild doing this thing. And I thought it was cool because, like, if somebody really loves Crucible, well then great. Everybody gets a little reward for that person really loving Crucible. If someone likes running the Nightfall, then the first person that runs it is the hero of the guild because they're going to get... Everyone in the guild is going to get a thing because they ran it. Like, the raid, we have been cheering on the people doing the raid. I mean, in part, probably because we know, like, as soon as they finish the raid, we're all going to get an engram that we can grab from the clan NPC. Same would be true if, like, we had people doing Trials of the Nine. As soon as someone got their flawless and got to the tower, the lighthouse is what they used to call it. It's something different now, but basically the new place where only you can go if you've gone flawless. Like, as soon as somebody got there, like, everyone in the guild would get some benefit from doing it. But there are a lot of people that are up in arms because they don't like that everyone in their clan gets something free for their efforts.
It's
like,
your clan.
Firstly, if you have this problem about your own clan, then either you're a horrible person,
wow,
or you're not really... like, in a good clan. Like, if you don't want them to have nice things, then that's just weird to me.
Yeah, just if it bothers you that much that your presumably friends are getting something nice because you got something nice, then, like, maybe you should not have friends. Like, that should not be allowed.
So I think a lot of it is the fact that, like, the raid and trials engrams are kind of special in that you get a roll for a random item on the loot table from the normal mode of the raid and for the minimal mode of trials. Like, in both of those cases, if you get absolutely perfect, there is a pool of, like, prestige items that you can get if you've gone perfect. If you do, like, the heroic mode of the raid, like, there's a special type of item, like a different set of items that you can get from heroic mode. So, like, those are not eligible from the clan engram, but all the normal stuff are. And I think people are having a lot of trouble, like, you can get raid loot without raiding. But at the end of the day, like at the end of the day, all of these items are functionally the same. Like it's sure the guns feel different, they have different perks, but I have a bunch of raid weapons from Destiny 1. I also still use a lot of weapons that come from other sources in the raid. Like, they're not immediately superior to every other weapon. Like, there's a couple of them that I got used to using, and I started using them, and I'm sure the same will be true with any of the raid content or the trials content that comes from Destiny 2. But it floors me that anyone would not want their clan to have cool stuff, based on their actions.
I guess I sort of understand that mindset in that a lot of people just want to have the cool thing for themselves and themselves only. But I would say that maybe you shouldn't be in a clan, but there are rewards for being in a clan, right?
Oh, then they get to make a choice. Is it more important to have the rewards from being in a clan, or is it more important to be the only person who got that cool thing?
And I guess that's something that I've never really understood. Like, I get...
I don't share the mindset, but I get the mindset.
I mean, I get that the mindset exists, but, I've never understood how you having something nice... other people having something nice lessens the nice thing you also have. And, I've gone around and around with some of the people in WoW that are, mythic raiders that, don't want anyone to get nice things. They were super at arms when the whole friendship moose thing was happening, and people were running other people through to get their nifty, flying moose.
There are a lot of people who really do believe something is only special if only they have it, or it shows that they did something special.
The friendship moose thing drives me completely crazy, because that's not even they dumbed it down so that now anybody can go in there and solo that place and get that moose. No, those people still had to find a group of people who were competent enough to clear the raid and were willing to bring them through, either because of the friendship moose thing, or because they paid gold to do it, or they were their guild and they liked them for some reason. The dungeon or the raid was still legitimately cleared, and arguably with a handicap, right? Because they're dragging around at least one and usually several people who are not actively contributing to the raid. They're just there to get their moose.
When I got mine, I straight up died early on and was nothing but a liability.
Oh, me too. I intentionally just tanked the floor because I didn't want to screw up a mechanic. And I have no regrets. I have a cool moose. I don't feel like I earned the moose. I don't feel like it was the same kind of reward as, say, some of the raid meta mounts that I've gotten in the past, where I was raiding with my guild and we all worked together really hard to earn those things. No, it's not the same sense of achievement, but it doesn't bother me that people can go back and get those now. When I see other people flying around on an Ironbound Protodrake, I'm like, oh cool, I love that mount. Not, how dare they have it instead of me, I worked hard for that.
A sort of more extreme example of this are the extreme primal mounts in FF14, which get easier to get once that raid tier is done.
And I love that system, right? If you get that mount early, then you're cool and you get to show it off. And then later, leeches like me can go in with a group of friends, flail ourselves around for a while, and also get shiny mounts. Everybody wins. And as a concept, I think that is a reasonable way to approach it. Also, have something that's really, really difficult to get for a little while. And so if you have it then you're cool and you do get to show off. But don't expect that it's going to stay super rare forever.
I don't know. I think there are just some people out there that have a really hard time being happy for others when they also have nice things.
I feel like those are the worst people to play MMOs, because they are playing MMOs because they want other people to feel inferior to them, or they want to I don't know. Maybe I'm being harsh. I'm probably being harsh, but
you're being accurate, I think.
Yeah, no, you're straight up being accurate. Because there are a lot of people that play these games that are not happy unless they are making someone else feel lesser. And that's just such a foreign mindset to me that I've never really understood it. But, I know I have insane luck, but I try really hard not to rub that in people's faces. In fact, Tam mentions it way more than I do.
I mean, you still will post when you open up a Masterpiece Mana Crypt off of a single pack you buy at crazy. A Walmart or a Target.
That was crazy. I had to post that.
But yes, that represents a silly, ridiculous amount of luck.
Yeah. Like, I don't post every time I buy 2 packs and I get 2 mythics. Which happens a lot.
Look, maybe Tim is...
Go ahead.
Sorry, I think I lagged out there for a second. Maybe Tim is onto something when he says your luck is completely and totally ridiculous.
It is sometimes.
I mean, you're totally allowed to post about these things, and we're totally allowed to point out that your luck is pretty ridiculous.
And anyway, that was probably... That conversation went in a bunch of directions, and I think it was a good conversation. But I'm going to move on. Through the Ages.
Yay!
What is Through the Ages?
Through the Ages is one of the original Vlaada Chvatil games.
Okay.
It is him making Civilization without a map, essentially. So you abstract out the map from Civilization, but you are managing the food, the production, the science, the tech tree, all of that of your civilization, your military, etc. It is probably the game I have played the most. Board game, I've logged at least 200 games of it, and given that it is a game that lasts anywhere from 2 to 6 hours, that is a lot of time spent on this game. And they just released it for iOS.
Please tell me the iOS version doesn't take that long.
I have already managed to get through a 2-player game during this podcast, so not quite.
I mean, like, are you playing actual people or are you playing AI?
I mean, it's still going to take a while. I mean, so I can get through an AI game pretty quickly, but I got through an actual game versus an actual human in, like, an hour and a half.
Okay, well, that's not bad. It's definitely the sort of thing that you know you're going to take a bunch of time to do it, but, like, if you know that ahead of time.
So, the game got released on a website, boardgaming-online. Yeah, boardgaming-online.com had what the only board game you could play there was Through the Ages, and so it got sort of supported by the creator as well when he found it, despite the fact that he could have really been like, "Hey, no, this isn't okay. Like you're releasing my game online. That's not right." He went behind it full-throated and actually used the data to revise the game for a recent printing, made some minor balance changes, probably pretty important balance changes, because the game used to be pick Napoleon, win game. It's but no, it's a fun little app. It's really good. His game Galaxy Trucker also got released for iOS. I actually don't think, like, that game is weird and maybe not as supportable on iOS. It's weird, but this is very supported on iOS, and you can, like, sort of do asynchronous play where you take a move, everyone gets, like, a day to pick their move, and you just play as you have time. And games will take weeks, but whatever. The app maintains your state for you.
Well, that's cool. Isn't Codenames also in mobile release?
I believe it is. That also seems like it would be weird to me.
Yeah, me too. I think that's the only game of his that I've actually ever played.
All of his games are very good. That game is accessible, though.
Yeah, that was quick to pick up. Like, I've taught lots of people how to play it. It was super easy, so...
His games are mostly all very, very well designed. He is my favorite board game designer. Not all of them are very accessible. Mage Knight is about as inaccessible as it gets.
Which is so weird considering what it's based on, which was an attempt to make... Like, I assume it's based on the Mage Knight click miniature.
Kind of.
Like, is it the same universe? And
it's the same universe.
Okay. Like those miniatures were attempting to make wargaming accessible, so...
So it is an adventure game with a very interesting resolution system where there is every single fight is a puzzle. That is a common theme of Vlaada games, is every single thing you do is a puzzle for you to solve. And you may or may not have the right pieces to solve this puzzle. And so you're trying to figure out how you can best solve this puzzle. And the puzzle in that game is pretty challenging, actually. Just because you need to be balancing, like, various forms of attack, various forms of block, various forms of movement, and you have all of these interesting spells that you're trying to maintain the mana for. It's extremely inaccessible. I love it to death. When I was in Georgia, I played that game quite a bit with a group of people who played almost exclusively Vlaada games. I guess that's not fair. We played a lot of other games, but we all loved Vlaada. And that's the group who introduced me to Through the Ages. But if you want a board game representation of Civilization that is actually not that complicated, because the hardest part of Civilization is, like, moving pieces around the map. It's also possibly, in my opinion, the least interesting part of Civilization. So you get rid of the map, and suddenly Civilization's a lot more fun and a lot more consumable. Like, if you want to go to war, you just play a card that says, I'm going to war with you, and then you see how much military each of you has, and whoever wins the war.
Can you also go into, like, culture wars?
So the goal of the game is to have the most culture at the end of the game.
Got it.
There are wars over culture, where the amount you defeat your opponent by is how much culture you steal from them. But you can also build culture-producing buildings, like libraries and operas. Or what you can do is my favorite thing, which is build a whole bunch of computers in the modern age, and then elect Sid Meier as your leader, who turns all of your computers into culture-generating factories.
Sid Meier, you say?
Sid Meier, I say. Maybe this game is not hiding its influences. Unfortunately, video games does make your science production go down a tick from your labs, but whatever, you're getting culture out of it.
All of your scientists waste time playing Civ instead of actually
doing science. Correct.
I mean,
accurate.
That's probably not actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, all of the leaders are have slightly different abilities, and you, like, can draft those and make them your leader. Like, Bill Gates causes all of your laboratories to produce materials for building more things. So he's like a science production type of guy. Albert Einstein just gives you a whole bunch of culture every time you discover new technology. Michelangelo is all about building wonders and making and earning culture off of things that make people happy. I highly recommend checking it out. It has a tutorial mode. It seems pretty good. The hard AI seems pretty strong. Like, I definitely ran right into one of the you're probably gonna lose this challenges and got pretty good and stomped. It's possible they didn't know how to finish out a game, but by the midpoint I was getting pretty beat up. I'm Kodra. If you want to play, let me know. I will be playing this game a lot.
Wonder if it's available on Android.
It is! Android and iOS.
Cool.
ThroughTheAges.com.
I need to pick up some of the board games for Android that are hopefully playable on the phone.
This one is very playable on the phone.
So, Ash, I know you've been playing some more Monster Hunter Stories.
I've been playing some more Monster Hunter Stories. Monster Hunter Stories is a creature-raising game not entirely unlike Pokemon, set in the Monster Hunter universe. A universe not at all suited to a creature-raising game. And weirdly enough, the story actually touches on this. You are a rider, and which means you tame these giant monsters and ride them around and fight with them. The universe also contains hunters, which is what you are in every single other entry in the Monster Hunter series, who go around and kill monsters. You actually also do a fair bit of going around and killing monsters, just you also do it while riding them. It's unlike Pokemon in that it doesn't have any sort of evolution. Once you have something, it will be that thing until you decide to stop using it. But you can sort of take special abilities from monsters and give them to other monsters, so you can have like an ice monster that has a fireball because you gave it a fireball from one of your fire monsters. And the battle system is definitely unique. They build it as sort of a rock, paper, scissors thing, and that's a very large component in that you have speed attacks, technique attacks, and power attacks, where speed beats power, technique beats speed, power beats technique. And enemies have tendencies toward one of these usually, so it's not that hard to win at rock, paper, scissors most of the time. But there are also special attacks that aren't aligned with any of those, and area attacks, and if you pick your attacks in a certain order, you can get combo attacks. So it's a lot more than just rock, paper, scissors, which is what I thought at first from the demo.
Especially on the mobile side of things, there's a lot of games that have an underlying rock, paper, scissors mechanic.
Everything Serlin develops?
I'm not a huge fan of rock, paper, scissors as a mechanic.
Well, I mean, like Fire Emblem Heroes on the phone, like your resists and such are all basically rock, paper, scissors. You have green, blue, and red, and
which are swords, axes, and spears.
Yeah, and like one of them has a weakness to the others. So certainly hope that you're not going to run into one of the characters with the weakness.
I find it quite functional in Monster Hunter Stories, although I also find it quite functional in Fire Emblem. Although in Fire Emblem also, once you get powerful enough, you can sort of ignore it, at least in the mainline games. But I'm finding it fun, despite it's sort of billed as a kid's game, and I thought it was sort of easy at first, and then I ran into something that completely kicked my butt. In the start of the third area, there's some rare monsters that if you run into them, maybe you should just run away. Come back later. Or come back with a trap or something. Because you are not going to beat it in a straight-up fight, even if you successfully predict everything.
I mean, technically, Pokemon is largely targeted at kids, and it's got infinite depth to it.
I don't know about infinite, but it's certainly a silly amount. I don't think this goes beyond Pokemon, because Pokemon is silly. But I am finding it quite fun.
It's awesome. And this is 3DS?
3DS. It's apparently an anime, but I haven't seen it.
It is on Crunchyroll.
Cross-media purposes.
Yeah, I've watched part of it. It's pretty good. It's entertaining, at least.
I hear the anime has a very, very slow start, though.
Yes.
Like, it takes 5 or 6 episodes to get to what happens in the opening of the game.
Well, it's like, it starts off all about, preparing to get their Monstie and have the binding ritual or whatever, and that kind of meanders for a while.
This is quite literally the opening of the game. So it gets going a little faster than that.
Speaking of 3DS, have you seen any of the stuff that's come out on the Pokeball edition of the new 2DS?
I have not.
Yeah, it's basically the new 2DS, but it's like a Pokeball-themed version. I don't know if we're actually going to get it over here, but it would be amazing if we did.
The Direct they had recently showed that we were getting the white and orange version, but it didn't show that one. So it may not be coming out over here. It seems like there's a lot of 3DS stuff coming out, though.
Yeah, this one is apparently readying for the launch of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon.
That makes sense.
But it's kind of made me want to wait to see if I can acquire one, because I would totally love to have that. I mean, I like the blue and black one just fine, but...
Yeah, this one is pretty amazing.
So, another thing on the near horizon is the Ixalan expansion for Magic the Gathering that features pirates and vampires and dinosaurs and merfolk.
I am kind of weirded out by these vampire conquistadors.
Yeah.
Like, so, this is... They've done, like, the feral vampires, and they've done the aristocratic vampires. This is a really different type of vampire on Ixalan.
They kind of remind me of, like, the Red Court vampires from Dresden.
I am not familiar with Dresden. What are Red Court vampires like?
They were like... I think they were, like, descended from the Aztec, if I remember correctly.
They're a little weird.
Yeah. But, so lore-wise, one of the things that's interesting about Ixalan, and the reason why there's such a weird assortment of things in Ixalan, is apparently once a planeswalker walks to Ixalan, they get trapped there forever.
Wait, does that mean
Jace won't see any more Jace?
Jace is trapped in Ixalan. There are other planeswalkers you run into that are also trapped in Ixalan. There's like a Minotaur planeswalker that nobody has a clue where he's from technically.
Interesting. But I hadn't heard this bit of lore.
Yeah, so like apparently that's the thing of Ixalan is like it's this kind of untamed plane that nobody's really knows about because once you've traveled there, you can't figure out how to get back out. So like that's apparently going to be a large part of the lore of this cycle is to see if there's a way around that.
Chase is going to find a way out, isn't he?
Chase is going to find a way out. Maybe he'll bring Vraska with him. She seems sweet.
Is that the pirate planeswalker?
It is the pirate, like, Gorgony planeswalker.
Yeah. I don't know. So, like, Loading Ready Run was doing a pre-release stream this afternoon on Twitch, and I watched little bits and pieces of it. They were, they weren't drafting, but they were doing booster construction, pre-constructed.
They are doing a pre-release, which is 6 packs that you build a 40-card deck from.
Sealed, basically.
Yeah, sealed. With 1 promo card.
Right. And they had the one sealed promo card, and they got to pick which promo card they were going to use.
You pick which promo card?
I think that's what they did. I don't know if...
I think the promo card is sealed. Now, in the past, they've had you, like, pick your
These
color.
were just in a cellophane. Like, these weren't, like, sealed as in, like, foil magic pack. These were just, like, a cellophane sealed.
I'll have to go back and check. That's usually inside of a box that the sealed product comes in. You don't get to see what the card is.
I tuned in late, so maybe they had already opened the boxes at that point.
So... a while ago, you could pick a color, like in Magic Origins, you would pick a color, and you would get a booster pack full of cards of that color. And it would, like, seed your deck, essentially, to weight it towards a certain color.
That did not seem to exist.
Yeah, I don't think... that hasn't existed since Magic Origins. I could have seen it happening here, where you pick one of the 4 tribes... But I also understand that was not considered much of a success.
They all seem to have... I mean, like, I don't know if they specifically chose the cards to play. That they had someone to match that was their single promo card, or if they got to choose. But like, all of them seem to have one that matched their deck concept pretty well.
Well. So what typically happens is you open a busted promo card, and then you figure out how you play that promo card. Like that's sort of how you go into sealed.
Some of these people were artists that had worked on the set, and they mostly built sets around the ability to play cards they had worked on.
I can definitely see them doing that, and I only watched like the first match. And I got to see Cameron take over a game with a Jace at 2 life. Like,
Jace is silly.
Gets down to 2 life, manages to clear the board, and then plays a Jace, makes an illusion, and that was the slow, inexorable end of the game.
So I watched a match with a predominantly black lifelink deck that had the legendary enchantment land. That was never going to see play. Like, I mean, it was never going to flip, because he was never going to drop down to 5 health.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's the case, then you can just keep using it to draw yourself cards.
That's what he was doing. He's basically like, he kept borrowing from the excess of 20 to draw more cards.
So, Black Lifelink is gonna be really cool, because there are a lot of white vampires that get pretty powerful effects when you pay a certain amount of life.
Yeah, I was shocked at how many white vampires there were.
Well, that's the thing. The vampire tribe here is white and black.
There also seemed to be a lot of synergy between white and red.
Well, that would be probably some dinosaur synergy.
Yeah, because they were basically like white, like small creatures, 1/1s. Or actually, in this case, it was like a 0/3 that made it cheaper to play additional dinosaurs. So it was like a Dinomancer type card, but I don't remember what it was called. Yeah, it was really cheap to get it on the board, and you could use it to block a little bit of fodder while building something bigger. But
yeah, you let it sustain you until you get your big stupid lizards on the board.
Yes, and there are definitely some big stupid lizards.
Sounds like a description of a dragon stack.
Yeah, but the big stupid lizards don't fly, which makes them even stupider than dragons.
They kind of feed off each other. Like some of the card text rules, I have no clue what they are. Like I don't know what raid is. I don't know what reach is.
Reaches can block flying. Raid is some bonus if you have attacked with. Wait, I think it's if you have attacked with a creature this turn.
Yes, if you attacked this turn with a creature, you get the raid trigger. A lot of pirates have raid. It's really, really funny.
I know for dinosaurs they introduced Enrage.
Enrage is pretty sweet.
Grants a bonus if you have taken damage.
As are a lot of the cards that are like deal 1 damage to a creature you control, it gains trample. Or like stuff.
Dinosaurs get stompy when they're mad.
Or there's a lot of cards that deal like 1 damage to all creatures, and that's pretty sweet in an Enrage deck.
It feels weird to want to be doing damage to your own creatures.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly like something that you do a lot in Hearthstone, so I'm not really surprised.
Yeah, but in Hearthstone, that damage is permanent.
Right, but like there's a lot of, Enrage cards that gain a bonus if they've taken damage.
Some of those dinosaurs are going to make it really hard to attack through. Oh, huh. This is it. I was like, Vraska looks like a Gorgon. Vraska is a Gorgon. She's from Theros.
Weird.
Why is Vraska here now?
I guess she couldn't get out.
Oh no, she's from Ravnica. Weird. She was the assassin planeswalker before.
Just in a little bit I saw of it, it looks like a really fun set.
It looks like a fun set to play Unlimited, because you're going to get to play big, dumb, stompy things.
Well, and there's like a ton of synergy between cards.
Yeah, well, they have been designing sets to have tons of synergy between them. I highly recommend checking out a pre-release. They're happening next weekend at local game stores around the country.
Yup. There anything else we want to talk about?
The fact that there is a Jace that makes more Jaces is silly. And the fact that they reprinted Gaia's Cradle is sillier.
And made it kind of a better Gaia's Cradle?
No, it's
not a better Gaia's Cradle.
No.
So while the flip side is better than Gaia's Cradle, the fact that you have to flip it makes it not as good as Gaia's Cradle.
Okay.
It makes it much, 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 much worse than Gaia's Cradle. It's still
but not enough
good.
Worse that it isn't busted.
Yeah. This card is much worse than Gaia's Cradle. I will still play it. Because Gaia's Cradle was a silly card. I'm really sad that I didn't get a
no, you were never going to
Sanctum
get
or a Talarian
Academy again. It was never going to happen.
Look,
only one of those cards is banned in Commander. Just putting that out there. It's not Gaia's Cradle.
Oh, I don't know why. Aren't creatures way more common than artifacts?
Cough.
Cough.
Would you like to talk Thopters, Clues, or Treasure first?
Treasure is new.
Okay, so how do vehicles actually work?
So a vehicle is an artifact, but you can crew it by tapping up to its crew value worth of power of creatures. So
now, do they just stay tapped while they're crewing the artifact?
You just tap them. They are tapped for that. They are tapped until your next untap step. At which point, and so after you crew them, the vehicle becomes a creature and can act like a creature.
Until end of turn.
So you functionally have to crew them every time you want them to act like a creature?
Yes.
Okay. So if you want to use this thing regularly, you're just going to end up tapping your creatures and assigning them.
Yes, although usually the vehicles you are crewing are pretty potent, and you're not you're like, it allows you to what crewing does is it allows a lot of vehicles to dodge sorcery speed removal, because most removal in limited at least is going to be killing creatures, and vehicles aren't creatures on your opponent's turn.
Yeah.
Also allows vehicles to avoid board wipes.
Unless it's literally destroy all permanents.
Yeah, which there aren't a ton of those. And they're typically very expensive. Like 7 CMC 6 and up. Mardu Vehicles was a pretty dominant deck for a good couple of rotations.
I mean, that's why the cheap vehicle got banned in Standard, right?
Yeah, like Smuggler's Copter is banned in Standard because every single deck was running it. And also, if both that and Heart of Kirin were out at the same time, that would have been unstoppably bad. Because Heart of Kirin
vehicles seem not as good as the Kaladesh vehicles.
That would be my assessment too. They are big, silly pirate ships.
I mean, one of them becomes a land, but
I don't think any of them fly.
None of them fly.
Also, that one that becomes a land is probably pretty funny in a deck that has something that assigns damage based on toughness.
There is that. It's a 2/10. But once it attacks, it flips, so you only get one use out of that.
Does it have to flip or may?
Not sure. It has to flip. You exile it and it flips.
Boo.
Unlike the various legendary enchantments, which I think are all may flip. Well, okay, those are split too.
I think you have to exile these because of the rules of Magic. Because the cards are like, you can just transform a creature into another creature, but I don't think the rules of Magic actually allow you to transform a creature directly into a land.
Because of things like damage marked on it, so on and so forth.
I don't know why, but it doesn't make sense why they don't just have you transform, like, they have you exile it first.
I know all the Origins Planeswalkers are like that too.
Yeah, and I think it's because they are transforming something from one super type into another super type.
I mean, it doesn't seem to be a problem for the enchantments, because you can't have damage marked on an enchantment. Theoretically. There are some exceptions here.
How did they work it with the enchantment creatures?
Most enchantment creatures are either the gods, which have an effect and just aren't considered creatures unless you have devotion to their colors.
But they don't ever go back to being an enchantment.
They're always enchantments.
I mean, they don't. From being a creature, they don't go back to being only an enchantment.
Yes.
They can if you lose devotion. They can.
Well, then what happens to
any auras you have on them?
Yeah.
Any auras you have on them are destroyed because they're no longer creatures. I have no idea what happens to any damage you have marked on them.
Well, the devotion transform thing probably really isn't at instant speed.
Because they have indestructible. I think they universally have indestructible, but
yes,
there are probably some weird edge cases there, possibly involving opalescence.
Actually, I'm wondering if there's some weird edge cases possibly involving board wipe style -X cards.
Well, they would apply to all creatures, so it would either apply to them or not apply to them, depending on your devotion.
It almost makes me think there was an earlier ruling with one of those. They appeared a lot in green, where the forest could become 3/3 creatures until end of turn. Or there was one.
Zendikar had a lot of animate land effects.
I remember there was one that I don't know if it was an artifact or something that allowed you to transform at will.
I do think it is to clearly delineate that anything attached to the thing transforming goes away. Because I really think they don't want you interacting with the they don't want you having to touch state-based action rules. Which I don't want to touch state-based action rules. I feel okay not really knowing all of the state-based action rules.
What do you mean by that? Other than things like 2 legendary permanents cause 1 to go away, and a creature with 0 toughness goes to the graveyard. Those are ones that you have to interact with on a not completely regular basis.
I did find it weird that they're making a universal ruling that, you can have a bunch of Chandras.
Yes.
But they each have to be a specific, unique version of Chandra.
Yes.
Unless they're new Jace.
Because new Jace has an ultimate that creates non-legendary new Jaces.
This ruling has had a few weird things happen because of it. Like, some commander decks got a whole lot better. A particular commander went up in price like $20 when they announced this ruling. Captain Sisay is a commander who can fetch legendary permanents out of your deck. So with all planeswalkers becoming legendary, then she can just get you a planeswalker.
Huh. So I'm reading the state-based action rules. One that I had forgotten about is if a permanent has both a +1/+1 counter and a -1/-1 counter on it, in +1/+1 and in -1/-1 counters are removed from it, where in is the smaller of the number of +1/+1 and -1/-1 counters on it.
So like counters cancel each other out as a state-based action.
Yes.
You're right. This is the section of the rules where we start finding weird edge cases.
Yeah, like, this is 100% the part of the rules where you find weird edge cases, and you really never want to go here. You never want to get surprised by one of these rules. And so, if the card designers can figure out a way to try and make cards work within the standard rules cleaner, they're probably going to do that. And I think that's probably why they have everything exiled before it transforms. Because rules for changing zones happens all the time. And that's something they consider a core rule.
In the case of Commander, you can run into some weird edge cases there too, though.
Sure. Commander is the format made by and for board judges.
Yeah, that's not wrong. If you somehow manage to steal somebody's commander for a turn and Conjurer's Closet it, then they can choose to have a return to the command zone when it exiles, but you will still get it back because it's still in a public zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Magic.
We have any other topics we want to talk about before we close things out?
I think we're pretty good.
Okie doke.
Divinity Original Sin 2 came out this week.
Like,
I haven't had
legit
much of a chance to play it.
or...
Legit came out.
Okay.
Isn't that going to be some sort of game of the month, potentially?
It seems pretty likely.
I assume it's next game of the month.
This is pretty likely.
Anyway.
Gonna be fun.
Well, hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night!
See ya.
Good night.
Good night.